Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Calling the meeting to order. We stand for a moment of silence and the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we can have the roll call, please.
Mr. Girardi?
Here.
Mr. Cox? Mr. Hansel?
Here.
Mr. Size?
Here.
Mr. Tonello?
Here.
And Chairman Gray?
I'm here.
Thank you.
And proof of publication.
These items were published in the Tampa Bay Times on September 6th and September 13th, 2019, and by affidavit of mail and site postings.
All right. If anybody thinks they may give testimony today, if you could stand and be sworn, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
I think
State your name and address for the record and indicate whether you've been sworn, please.
Okay, thank you. We're the Planning Commission, appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and we meet twice monthly. We serve as the local planning agency, and we hold public hearings and transmit to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations on comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezonings, and conditional use requests. Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, and certain alternative standard requests. However, final decisions may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. If anyone is in opposition to any development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission is the final decision-making body, it's important for you to attend the appropriate Board of County Commissioner meetings. For those of you who are not familiar with our format, I think we have, I think everything today is on consent, is it not? So typically we have continuances and then we have consent and regular items. But everything on the agenda today is on consent unless something is pulled. So we'll go through those items on consent one at a time. If you have anything that you want to have discussed today, raise your hand. We'll pull it for discussion. Otherwise, it'll remain on consent and be voted on at one time. Is there anyone here who is here to speak on something that's not on today's agenda? Okay. So for those who intend to speak, the applicants will have 3 minutes to make a presentation if needed, and the respondents or questioners will have 3 minutes to ask questions, and then the applicant will have a time to respond if necessary. This is a good time to silence your telephones if you've got one with you. And I think we're ready to go, Denise.
Okay.
We don't
Good
have any
afternoon,
minutes.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. I apologize for the way the agenda is formatted. It's my mistake. On the consent should be PC1, P3, P4, and P5. So PC1 is PDD 191333, and this item is for a transportation corridor management variance request. It's in the name of Bid Properties LLC, Pasco Storage Facility, and the request is for a variance allowing the exemption of right-of-way dedication and preservation requirement and exemption of buffer relocation. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions as contained in your packet.
All right, and is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? No objections?
Following item on consent is item P3, PDD 191158. It's a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, CPAS 1905, Land O'Lakes Commercial. It's for an amendment to the future land use maps 2-15 and sheet 20, changing from Res 3, residential 3 dwelling units per gross acre, to COM commercial on 6.82 acres. This comes to you with a recommendation of, on this item, you're actually sitting as a local planning agency, and what we're asking you to do today is to find the proposed comprehensive plan amendment consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and to recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right. Is anybody here to speak on this one today? See no one?
Following item is item P4, PDD 197420, in the name of State Road 52 Industrial EC MPUD, Employment Center Master Plan Unit Development District, 3KS Family Limited Partnership. This is for a rezoning from AC Agricultural District to an Employment Center Master Plan Unit Development District to allow 1 million square feet of light industrial and 200,000 square feet of support commercial on approximately 130 acres. On this item, staff and the applicant, we are still negotiating on condition number 13, but at this point, and we will do so before this goes to the Board of County Commissioners, but at this point, we're asking for you to approve this item with conditions.
Okay. Anyone here to speak on this? P4. Okay.
Item P5 is PDD 19-1257 in the name of Summer Lake Villas MPUD Master Plan Unit Development District, Summer Lake Villas LLC. This is for a substantial modification to change the name of an existing MPUD. It used to be called Sunset Bay Club Master Plan Unit Development District to Summer Lake Villas MPUD Master Plan Unit Development District to allow or to add actually 84 units for a total of 228 multifamily units, and to amend the conditions of approval that are related to the proposed modifications. On this item, we're asking you to approve this item with conditions. Staff recommendation.
Applicant present? Anyone here to object? See no one?
And that is the end of the consent agenda.
Okay. So, any questions from the dais? If not, can I have a motion to approve consent agenda as submitted?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll now move to item P2. Oops. So item P2 is the biannual minor fixes to the land development code. So I will read the ordinance title and go over the sections. This is an ordinance by the Pasco County Board of County Commissioners amending the Pasco County Land Development Code, Section 303.6, Application Submittal and Acceptance, Section 303.7, Application Review, Section 402.1, Zoning Amendment Euclidean, Section 402.2, Zoning Amendment Master Plan Unit Development District, Section 402.3, Conditional Uses, Section 402.4, Special Exceptions, Section 403.1, Preliminary Development Plan Residential, Section 403.5, construction plans, Section 403.10 landscape plan, adding new section, Section 406.8 garden plan permits, Section 522.9 connected city master plan unit development district, Section 527C3 commercial light manufacturing district, Section 530 community gardens, market gardens, and community farms, Section 603 connected city stewardship district, Section 700 subdivision and plating standards, Section 901.4 substandard roadway analysis and mitigation, Section 901.6 street design and dedication, Section 901.9 street naming and addressing, Section 902.2 stormwater management requirements, Section 905.2 landscaping and buffering, Appendix A definitions, and other sections as necessary for internal consistency, providing for applicability, repealer, providing for severability, inclusion into the land development code, and an effective date.
Hey Denise,
Yes.
for the future, and I probably should have said this
Don't
before.
have to say that at the local planning
You don't have
agency.
to read that at the LPA.
Yeah, I just realized after I started
It's
doing
only a board
it.
requirement, so.
I just started, I
I
just
know,
realized after.
I'm fine, I'm glad that you're in the habit, but
Thank
you
you.
technically don't have to do it at LPA.
Yes.
You did it well, though.
Thank you. So today, we're here, this is, again, one of the biannual, they used to be annual, but now it looks like it's happening about 2 times a year, minor fixes that we encounter based on different things. And as we go through them, I will explain what the genesis of these proposed changes are. These items were actually presented to the horizontal roundtable and the interested parties meeting on August 21st, 2019, and on September 11th, 2019. So one of the things I should start by is that some of these changes are as a result of changes that occurred in the 2019 Florida legislative session, and you'll see that as a theme throughout. So the first item is not one of those items, but we were noticing that we were not noticing applicants of substantial modifications, which is basically the same thing as a new master plan. So we needed to, or a new preliminary development plan or a preliminary site plan. So we wanted to add that in our table that we have to notice our folks within 500 feet or 1,000 feet of any substantial modifications to preliminary site plans, preliminary development plans, and mass grading. So that was found as a one of these items that we didn't pick up when we did the land development code rewrite in 2012. The following few items are basically, we're changing our procedures review timelines because our procedure review timelines are not consistent with Chapter 125.022 Florida statutes. So Chapter 125.022 Florida statutes basically, in a nutshell, I'm not going to go really dive deep into it, but basically says that if something is staff approved or it doesn't have to go to a public hearing, from beginning of the submittal to the end of the submittal, 120 days. If something has to go to a public hearing from beginning to end, it's 180 days. So there are parts in our code that, for example, we allow the applicant, and we've made these modifications to address that, we allow the applicant, in some cases, 180 days to return comments. Well, that would not be consistent with 125.022. So what we've done throughout the land development code, where it talks about review timelines, we've basically stated that they are to be consistent with 125.022 Florida statutes. So that those are the changes to 300, to 402.1, which is zoning amendment Euclidean, and some others throughout. So you'll see that as a theme throughout these changes. The following item is change to 402, and please stop me if you have a question. I would appreciate that. The following item is 402.2 zoning amendment MPUD. So there was a determination made by our planning and development administrator last year that basically said, well, the comp plan doesn't necessarily state that if you are in a coastal high hazard area that you have to develop the property, it has to be an MPUD rezoning. So we wanted to modify 402.2 to add that catch where it's unless otherwise determined by the county administrator or designee. If you're in a coastal high hazard area, you don't necessarily have to do a master plan. In 402.2, it states that anything in the coastal high hazard area requires a master plan. Again, we're going to continue to see 402.2 zoning amendment MPUD to be consistent with 125.022 Florida statutes, 402.3 conditional uses. Everywhere where we call out deadlines or timelines for review, it's to be consistent with 125.022. On 403.1, we were seeing in our code that site development permit doesn't happen all the time for every type of development, but we also always have a development approval. So we wanted to change the word site development permit to development approval. It's just a modification of the terms. 403.5, this is an unintended consequence of when we did the last code amendment, which was, I think, 34. We should have caught this, that when we, that projects that are, that qualify for a no improvement plat in accordance with 700.2 don't require, a construction plan is not required of those projects. So we wanted to include that in there. The following section, 403.10, it does say it's a new section, but it was actually pulled out as we looked at 905.2. The redevelopment landscaping was pulled out of 905.2 and just pushed into 403.10 because it's the landscape plan requirements. Section 406.8 was changed. Also, something else that happened in the 2019 Florida legislature that basically said that, that home gardens, vegetable gardens, I'm sure you remember some of those lawsuits a couple of years ago, are permitted uses anywhere in any place that there is a residential dwelling. So we wanted to make our code consistent with 604.71.
Okay, can I ask a quick question? What about HOAs that prevent these types of activities?
I would direct that to the county attorney. I don't believe that the HOA can prevent that anymore.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Sorry, I missed the question. What was the question?
Having a vegetable garden in the front of the house.
The chapter allows for a homeowner to have a vegetable garden on their property. However, HOAs, at least some of them, prevent that from occurring. So my question would
I'd have to
be,
research that because I don't typically advise HOAs, so I don't know. I'll
Okay.
answer that question.
thank you.
We'll look into that. Okay, okay, this next section, 522.9, when the Connected City Master Plan Unit Development District was created, there were certain items that were not put, that are within the regular land development code that did not go into 522.9 Connected City Master Plan Unit Development District. So just recently, someone wanted to do a modification to a submittal requirement. We were like, well, you didn't request that. So we want to put this back into the code where that we are allowed to modify submittal requirements for Connected City Master Plan Unit Development Districts. Section 527C3, this is just basically a legacy issue. In 2007, with the adoption of the comprehensive plan, there was a new land use that was COM, C-O-M. So in that section, it doesn't say that that properties that are COM, commercial, can seek C3 zoning, and that is something that should have been in the land development code since when it was rewritten in 2012. Section 530.23, it just clarifies when a permit is required for community gardens and market gardens and community farms. This is as a result of the Food Policy Advisory Committee bringing back those comments. And currently, it basically says you need permits for everything. Now it clarifies that you need a permit if you have a community garden with a structure, a market garden either with or without a structure, and community farms only with structures. Also, that it adds language consistent with 604.71, stating that a home garden or a vegetable garden is a principal permitted use in residential districts. Section 603, Connected City Stewardship District, this basically adds, there's right now a cap of $150,000 to get planning fee credits. It adds an opening that at the discretion of the county administrator or designee, the Connected City property owner member group may go above the $150,000 annual limit. Chapter 700, subdivision and platting standards. Again, this is to make it consistent with section 125.022 Florida statutes. Following 901.4 substandard roadway analysis, this here is a glitch. This should have always captured Euclidean zoning districts that generate more than 100 daily trips in the applicability section. It's actually elsewhere in the code, but it's not in the applicability section, and that should have always been in the applicability section. Section 901.6.E.5 roadside design. This comes from the Tampa Bay Builders Association because they're actually building smaller townhome projects. And the garage, the actual driveway width to the garage, they wanted it to be less wide. Right now, our code, I believe, calls out like a minimum of 12 feet, and they wanted to reduce to 9. Section 901.9, street naming and addressing. This basically, this is for our first responders. We understand that some folks like to have vanity names, but it cannot be used for the purposes of, if the street already has a name, the secondary name, such as a vanity name, cannot be used for addressing purposes. It's very confusing to our first responders. 902.2K, this is something that's already, as you've probably seen, inside your MPUDs as a condition of approval, so we're just basically placing it into the land development code. that adds exceptions that do not impede drainage and setbacks, such as fences within drainage easements and fences within setbacks. And this is your standard language in the MPUD, so we're putting that into our stormwater management requirements. 902.2K, this comes from the Tampa Bay Builders Association to remove the requirement for gutters on type A drainage lots. 905.2, landscaping and buffering. This basically adds a note, and this is for clarity for the person who's reviewing the item, that clarifies that unless specifically stated in another section in the code, landscape buffers are from the zoning district or use, whichever is the stricter of the two. Because sometimes you'll have a zoning district and you'll have a use. The use is commercial, the zoning district may be residential, so we need to use the stricter of the two, or vice versa. 905.2, landscaping and buffering. This is where before 403.10, we added that new landscape section, so we pulled that language out of that section in 905.2, put it into 403.10.
Denise, can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
I realize that's what you did. I guess my question is, at the very end of that section, it talks about simultaneous review or simultaneous submissions. Are you all still doing simultaneous submissions given the statutory change? I mean, because
As far as I know, we're doing simultaneous
Yes.
submissions, yes.
yes, you are.
Simultaneous,
For site plans and construction
yeah.
plans, yes.
Simultaneous,
Landscaping, so you can live with the statutory deadlines even under simultaneous submission?
Yes.
Okay.
yes,
You
the
answered that.
simultaneous submission is the preliminary site plan, the stormwater management plan, and report on the construction plan happening all at once. So that's what a simultaneous
What
submission is.
you're not doing simultaneous submissions on is zoning
Correct,
and
yes,
site plan?
yes.
Okay, that answers my
correct.
question.
Okay, and on Appendix A, there's some changes to definitions. On the definition for water service facilities, we're inserting reclaimed water storage and transmission facilities. On the home garden and vegetable garden, we're defining the item in accordance with 604.71 so that the definitions are identical to the definition of the item in 604.71 Florida statute. And in Appendix A definition, we're removing the word plan amendment from the definition of development order. And that is all. I appreciate this is a lot to take in. Today, we're asking you to find the proposed amendments consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and to recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
So Denise, I have a question that
Yes.
you probably can't answer, or probably need Mr. Richards to answer. I'm fine with the change to add reclaimed underwater, but my question is, are you intending to make that prospective only, or you want to spend funds you've already collected for wastewater on water? Is my question clear?
Yes.
So.
I'm Joe Richards, County Attorney's Office.
So I'm fine with the change you made, which you put reclaimed into water and not. So my question is, are you wanting to do this only on a going forward basis where only new funds you collect can be spent for that purpose? Only new, or you want to spend existing water impact fees on reclaimed?
I think that this would have to be a prospective change, and that's the intent. So
Okay.
going forward.
I'm okay either way, but if you want to make it retroactive, there's language that Denise is going to have to put in the effective date section of this ordinance that says that section, that change is retroactive.
Okay.
So I'm okay either way, but there's language you have to add to the ordinance if you want it to be retroactive.
Okay.
Otherwise, this is going to be deemed prospective.
All right, well, I'll discuss that with Denise and the utility department, see how they want to handle it.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your attention, and here for any questions you may have.
Any questions? Have a motion then?
Is there anybody from,
Barbara, do you want to speak? I do. Oh. You're just normally so quiet.
I know.
Shocked me.
Barbara Wilhite, 6327 Grand Boulevard, Newport, Florida, 34652. I don't know if that you all really heard what David was asking of Denise. Can you still do simultaneous submissions with comp plans and rezonings and plans? So the answer is no, which is a big change. So I have stacks of applications sitting in my office all around my conference room table because of this change. Staff has said their hands are tied because of the ordinance, the state law, but David's advised me it can be waived. So I'm just trying to figure out why I have stacks of applications of projects that need to get going sitting in my office because we don't have a way to waive that statute. And now we're telling people, you have to wait, you have to do your comp plan, then your zoning, and then your plans. I have an economic development project, and they were told, you have to wait till your MPUD's done before you can submit your plans. They'll expedite the plans once it's submitted. But that's really not the message that I really wanted to take to that client when they sat down with the county as an economic development project and were told, you can no longer simultaneously submit because the state legislature thought they were trying to do something helpful for development, which was to reduce the timeframes. And here in Pasco, it's being implemented to increase the timeframes. So I'm just disappointed in that result and that there isn't any other solution. It's hard to tell clients when they gasped before at how long it took to get something done, that we're now extending the process here in Pasco County. So I can't imagine, because process is process, it's not physical, it's a thing, that there couldn't be a solution, but I don't think one's been arrived at. And I also hear that maybe that legislation might be repealed, so I don't know what'll happen, but I wanted to make sure I put that on the record because I'm having to talk to those clients about why their applications are stacked up in my office. Small-scale comp plan amendment waiting a month to submit it. A month it's been sitting there for under 5 acres. So, thank you for
Barbara,
listening.
what solution are you offering?
I thought when I reached out to David and he advised, which I thought was the case too, that you can waive that statute, which is if I don't want to be under the statutory timeframes, and if I was happy with the county process, not anybody's ever happy with process, but at least we were working with the process and working together with staff to meet some reasonable timeframes for these projects. I thought that was it. I was like, woohoo, we just waive it. You know, we can continue going on the process we had before, but then there was a bunch of explanations about Acela and I don't know, it kind of hurt my head after that point, and so I threw up my hands. I know I've had clients approach, that asked me about it. I said, well, you go talk to Don, and they've met with Don, and Don's told them the same thing. There's nothing we can do, but so I don't know. I as a lawyer, waive it, but then apparently there's some other procedural issues. But I wanted to just bring this to your attention because it's impacting projects in Pasco County already.
Well, I understand what your concern is, but what I'm trying to get at is what can we do to resolve it?
So I think staff's going to have to address that because I actually don't think it's a legal issue.
Victorio Spitos, Planning and Development Department Director. So what Barbara's referring to is the recent state law change with regard to HB 7103. And as Denise had mentioned earlier, the new statute established 180 days for the review of MPUDs. Well, for items that go before public hearings, which is an MPUD in this case, in this example. And well, we've taken a look at our timelines and we've said, well, the average time that it takes a comprehensive plan amendment to currently move through the process right now from LPA all the way to adoption and ultimately to effective date is about 8 months. And while we're working to reduce that time from 8 months to 6 months, you really can't guarantee that a comprehensive plan is going to be finished in time for the MPUD to take effect, were the MPUD to be submitted simultaneously with the comprehensive plan. Because the comprehensive plan is governed by the Growth Management Act, which is a whole different timeline that the state has established. So Planning and Development's response to the law change basically is to recommend to the development community that they project manage the submittal of the comprehensive plan amendments and their MPUDs such that you bring in the comprehensive plan early enough, we get to a point where it's sufficiently capable of standing on its own feet and we know the direction of where the comprehensive plan is going to go, what the land use change that they're doing, where that's going to go, and then you bring in the submittal of the MPUD. At that point, it's a concurrent review. So we're not waiting for the comprehensive plan to actually make its way through the full process before we take in an MPUD and we want to look at it and review it. What this means substantially for the process itself is that when we've figured out the direction of the comprehensive plan, you have whole information that can then be given over to the MPUD reviews to inform the development of the MPUD based on what the comprehensive plan is going to be directing. And at that point, everything is working in sync. Previously, simultaneous reviews often resulted in competing provisions between comprehensive plan amendments and MPUDs, and there had to be a lot of interaction between reviewers to make sure that everything was consistent between the two types of projects. In this concurrent review, what you'll get is a complete package of comprehensive plan amendment information to inform the MPUD to make that complete, to then bring those together to the LPA, to the Planning Commission, to the Board of County Commissioners at the end.
Well, Terry, right now you said it's taken about 8 months to run through the process. So if we do what you're talking about doing, you're not waiting till the end, does that 8 months change? Does it get shorter?
It should, because 180 days is what the MPUD is allowed by state statute. So this is what would happen, basically. You begin the comprehensive plan amendment, and if you follow my proverbial line here,
Yeah.
You begin the comprehensive plan amendment, and as it is developed in the first 2 or 3 months, you determine what the direction of that amendment is, and then you're basically saying, well, okay, so we're at a point where you can submit your MPUD, submit the MPUD, and then your 180-day track begins. And so both items follow that 180-day track and end at the same time. 180 days is, that is 6 months. So
6 months plus the 2 months.
yeah, so another way to say it, a little bit more shorter, is if we're targeting 6 months for comprehensive plan amendments, which is for large scale, so it's much faster than we've done it before. So that's our target. You build those 180 days for the MPUD into that comprehensive plan amendment window. And the intent is to end together at the same time without losing time. Now, all projects are different. There's complications involved, and the reviews are also different. Sometimes an MPUD holds things back. Sometimes the comprehensive plan amendment holds things back. But what we don't want to happen is an MPUD begins, and then it goes beyond the 180 days.
So David, what's your,
Well, I mean,
we have to-
clearly the statutory time frame is mandatory, and my personal opinion is this was a statutory change that the legislature didn't fully think through before they adopted it, because it's clearly having unintended consequences, and maybe that's why Barbara's suggesting it may be repealed. That being said, the reason I don't consider this to be a legal issue is because while you have to follow the statute, there's clearly a provision that says both parties may agree to a reasonable request for an extension of time. So the parties can agree, the county and the applicant can agree to extend all of these statutory timeframes. But it would require both parties to agree, and whatever I'm hearing from Mr. Pitos and maybe Mr. Tippin is that the county's not willing to agree to those extensions because of the issues they just talked about. But I'll let, if Brad wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Brad Tippin, Planning and Development, just wanted to add a little bit on the bottom piece of what was talked about, the second part that Barbara mentioned, which was the Acela issue. You know, we've made efforts to allow for electronic submittals and other things like that that benefit all of the people that are working with the county and submitting to the county. Part of the issue with the waiver is that our Acela process has to be programmed. We have to have timelines programmed in there. So every small change that we might make on that can have an exponential number of other reprogramming changes that have to occur. So to basically start doing development by waiver becomes very, very difficult, both costly and also difficult simply to track for the people that are doing these reviews. So what we want to do is try to set up a timeline that's consistent with the statute that allows as much flexibility as we can to work with the development community to make sure all this stuff happens in a timely manner. To be able to do that, we're not really changing our review times. We're not extending our review times. The stretching out of time was basically because the different processes had to be overlapped a little bit, or pulled apart. They were allowed to overlap before, and they have to be pulled apart a little bit, like what Terry was explaining. When it comes to our site review, our review starts based on the standard county code. We have to be done within 21 days of that submittal being cleared, basically. So if that MPUD stuff is not to a point where we can review towards it in 21 days, we can't really produce any kind of recommendation in that timeline. So it just doesn't work with the processes that are in place. And we quite frankly have been looking at this for a while, haven't found any other real alternative other than possibly, hopefully, a repeal or some sort of a modification to the actual statute.
So I will point out, though, that what you're being asked to approve today doesn't necessarily preclude what Barbara's asking for, because it says either in accordance with the statute or the development manual. The development manual could have a process for a waiver process in it.
Correct.
You don't have one currently, but this change to the code isn't precluding you from having a waiver process in the development manual, correct?
And that is the plan, is to have a waiver process to be used in individual, unique, and needing circumstances rather than just as a matter of I'm submitting this and I want a waiver up front. That's the kind of thing that when every applicant does that, it creates an issue for the Acela programming to be able to work and function the way it's supposed to function. So we're trying to find some alternatives. Say if you want a waiver, instead of this process that we have in place here, this is the process you can use and it will afford you this. And we'll just have like kind of two set choices that you can choose from. So that's kind of where we're looking at going with the waiver. And then we'll always have the waiver for in case something comes up in an emergency
Do you know
situation.
what your timing is to make those, put that in the development manual?
Yes, it'll be in the development manual.
I know, but what is your timing to do the development manual part of this?
I don't know as far as the language on the waiver and how we want to do the waiver because everybody is still discussing that. The standard timeline pieces of the puzzle, for the most part, we're taking the language out of the code that was pre-existing, the ones that actually fit with the timeframes, and we're pulling those out. We're keeping that language. The ones that didn't, we're modifying. So it's a very short time to get to the development.
No, I get that you're having to do what you're doing
Right.
to comply with state law. I'm just, to address Barbara's concern, it sounds like Barbara's concern can be addressed in the development manual.
Yes,
You just haven't done it yet.
right.
So you may get asked, whether it's here or in front of the board, when are you going to do it? Because it's a concern that needs to be addressed.
That was my next question, because, you know, I'm hesitant to pass something subject to us believing that there's going to be a waiver process, and then it never happens, because there's no impetus for it to happen.
And what we're going to do is exactly that. We're going to create a waiver process. The way it was written, it was extremely vague in the House bill. Just basically says that there can be a waiver by agreement. So we have to actually develop that process that works within Acela, and there are a number of things from an IT perspective and a programming of the software perspective as to how that plays out. So I can't necessarily put a day and say within 30 days we'll have that. But we're actively working towards that, and we will have that, and the people that need something along those lines, we'll work with them to try and reach that.
What do you think is a reasonable amount of time?
I can't necessarily speak to that. Like I said, the majority of the information we have on the timelines, we have everything that's going to go into the development manual with the exception of the waiver process. So that's something that not only has to go through the IT and the Acela process to see how it plugs into our system, how it's going to affect the way our numbers are reported when they come out so they don't skew our data, and also goes through the county attorney's office for appropriateness and compliance. So, I mean, there's quite a few variables there, but we are actively working on it.
I think the dilemma that staff has is the state law changed, so effectively, it superseded all of our code requirements anyway. I mean, whether they make this change to the code or not, they're trying to make the code conform to state law, but when the legislature did that, they basically threw out whole sections of our code. And so I think, so staff has to do something. But my point is delaying this is not gonna solve the problem, because they still have to comply with the state law anyway.
So what about it, what if the state law disappears?
If the state law disappears, then we'd probably amend the code again. I mean, to be honest,
Well-
that happens all the time. We get
Yeah.
mandates from the legislature every year. So that's why Denise is doing this twice a year, is because half of those are because the legislature told us to do something differently, just like the garden thing.
Yeah.
That was a state law change as well, so it's gonna happen.
Well, one thing to keep in mind, Mr. Chairman, is the length of time it can take to do an MPUD, for example, as we continue to use this example. Some of the metrics that we have, the average amount of time is over 200 days to do an MPUD. So, yes, the average total days of review was 217.3 days to do a new MPUD from start to finish. And that was probably with simultaneous reviews. And so what we're asking, what is effectively being established by the state statutes and our code updates here, is to get far enough along on the comprehensive plan amendment such that the MPUD itself can be, the review of that can shrink from 217 days on average, because some of them even go longer. I think there was one that was over 300 days. But shrink that average down, not just the average itself, but overall, all projects down to 180 days. So we should be getting faster at this. It should be creating efficiencies for us in the process. And I understand that the waiver, there's the discussion that we had with the waiver, but I think understanding the hard metrics too might give a little bit of a comfort zone for the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Well, just for clarification, though, comp plans and zoning can still run concurrently, right? So we'll
Yes.
still have occurrences where there's comp plan amendments and zonings that
Yes.
are on the same agenda.
Yes.
But zoning and plans cannot. Zoning and site development plans cannot.
Well, two things there. There's two separate things. So concurrent review will still be possible. All we're saying is that you have to get far enough along in the comprehensive plan to ensure that your MPUD can meet that 180-day timeline. So you can still run the concurrent review on the comprehensive plan. When an MPUD is not involved and you're looking at a rezoning itself, we believe that you can do that simultaneously. So that if a developer were to come in and wants to build a site plan, let's say a commercial office center or something like that, and they need to change the zoning to C2, for example. In that case, our staff has the hard facts within the code already to review that site plan against the C2 zoning district regulations. So we can be here running the rezoning review as we normally would, and upstairs in current planning, they can be reviewing that site plan. The only thing that site plan would be subject to is, of course, the approval of the rezoning itself.
Right.
So that simultaneous review will be able to continue.
That's good.
Okay, yeah, I just want to confirm, because I understood it a little differently when it was presented. So.
Yeah. Bless you, whoever that was.
The only question I have is, you said development manual. What stage is that in being completed, and what would be a projected date? And the other question I have, if Barbara indicated that she has a number of different projects on her, as she said, her desk or whatever, are they all being held up based on these changes in state law? Is a question I have, or is some of those can be completed? Because I don't know if I made myself clear on
Yes.
that one. I just, go
Yes,
ahead.
and the answer is it depends. Some of them would potentially be able to move forward, like Terry was explaining. The primary issue in this, when you're talking about simultaneous or concurrent submittals, either one, is that with an MPUD, if a comp plan is changing, you need to know what is most likely going to be the final outcome of that to be able to begin review on the next level. Same thing with an MPUD. With an MPUD, you have conditions of approval that are negotiated throughout the MPUD process. With the site plan review, from the time they submit it to the time we have to have our first comments out is a very short period of time, basically a month. It's a little bit more than that when you add everything up, but it's roughly a month of time. So if you submit an MPUD and a site plan at the same time, the MPUD hasn't gotten to a stage where you know the final conditions yet, and the site plan would already have to be issuing comments without the regulatory guidance to do so. That's a different scenario with a Euclidean rezoning, because a Euclidean rezoning, we can simply put a disclaimer in our approvals and our comments that say, you've requested this be reviewed against C2 criteria, and this is the comments because we have C2 criteria. We don't condition Euclidean rezoning, so there's nothing that's going to be
Okay,
variable.
I heard, I was trying to cut to the chase.
Okay.
If she has some projects that she would like to submit, but she has indicated that she cannot submit those, is that a valid statement? And the other question I had, and you haven't answered it, is this development manual. What stage are you in trying to complete that?
Okay, like I said earlier, we have all of the timeline information it's ready. All we basically could do to create a development manual today would be to staple all of that together. The one piece of that puzzle that is missing currently is the waiver, because we haven't had an opportunity to work that. We're still working on our standard Acela processes, and this is now something new that we're adding to the mix that we're trying to figure out how to do. So we have to work with the IT piece of the Acela for the timing of submissions and the automatic things that occur within Acela.
So you're looking at 6 months, a year, 4 months, 20 days?
I would say I'm fairly confident that we would be able to have the development manual done definitely within 6 months.
Okay.
And I would be hopeful for much sooner than that.
Okay.
Depends on what we hear. It really depends back on the software issues with Acela. That's going to be a big piece.
Will you be
of the puzzle.
taking the development manual to horizontal roundtable?
Yes.
All right, anything else? Roberto? All right. Are there no other questions? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval.
A motion to approve, second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so that was the last item, but before you adjourn, just want to go over with the Planning Commission, and I will hand this out and also send you an email in about an hour or so. The Board of County Commissioners has adopted the 2020 public hearing schedule for the public hearings of the board and of the Planning Commission for 2020, and I just wanted to provide this to the Planning Commission. And again, I'll also send you an email on what those dates are. It's pretty much the typical, the Thursday that the Board of County Commissioners, so the Board of County Commissioners will meet the Tuesday, the Planning Commission will meet that Thursday. First hearing of the month will be in Dade City, second will be in Newport Richey. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, because there might be elections or there might be a budget meeting that the board had to change, and therefore the Planning Commission's meeting changed. But these are the public hearing dates for 2020. And I've provided that to the clerk's office as well.
Denise, one more quick question. I know you advertised for the vacant position.
Yes,
When does that close?
good question. That closes October 11th. The actual advertising went out on the 12th, and the closing date for that is October 11th.
So if you know people that tend to apply, make sure they get their applications in by October 11th.
Yes, please.
All right.
Do you also want me to address the remote, the discussion on
Yeah, we
remote?
probably, yeah, because we got additional clarification on the having people attend from remote. Like, remember that somebody spoke? You want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Denise?
So basically, there was some additional clarification from county administration that the preference is actually The requirement is to use the same board policy, which is that we don't allow public comment from remote location. They would actually have to physically be at the public hearing where the public hearing has taken place. Remote is only for a situation where we think an item is on consent and for whatever reason it gets removed and the subject matter expert may be at the remote location, subject matter expert on staff that is, for staff to be able to answer questions.
So the short version is that county administrator does not want us using it for anybody other than staff.
Which is the board policy, so to follow the board policy.
Good policy.
All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.